This is a Rough Tiger production.
And you, and you, and you, and you were there. Some of it wasn't very nice, but most of it was beautiful.
Hello.
Hello, welcome back to Dream Idiots. How are you, Bryan?
Doing great. It's about 1,000 degrees in Texas, but other than that, I'm fine.
Well, we are not far behind you here in Colorado. It's been a hot one the last couple of days.
Hmm.
We've almost hit 100,
Oh
or at
shit,
least
really?
it,
God.
or at least it feels like it.
Hmm.
Each week, Bryan and I tell each other stories and bring you along for the ride here on Dream Idiots. And you can find us in a variety of places with a variety of stuff. Is that not the case, Bryan?
That is, yes. You can check us out on dreamidiots.com. And sorry, I'm dealing with a slight technical issue here on my computer. Please give us 5 stars on whichever platform you're listening to us on, whether that's Apple or Spotify or wherever. That'd be great. Shoot us a review and give us a curse word, give us a topic idea. Reach out in any way you'd like. You could drop us a line at dreamidiotspodcast at gmail, and you can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Dream Idiots. And thanks for hanging in there and listening to us every single week. We appreciate it.
Yes, indeed. And we don't have any announcements this week, I don't think,
Correct?
except there's still more crazy shit going on in the world, and we're trying to do our best to avoid that by telling each other stories. So, Bryan, I want to start off. I did a literary masterpiece last week of final lines of famous novels.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
And I
thanks
do have
again.
you're welcome. I do have a literary story this week. And Bryan, I thought between the two of us, can we kick around some Texas authors? What are some Texas authors that we might be familiar with or famous books about Texas? Can you
Texas,
rattle off any Texas authors?
um, Larry McMurtry,
Yeah, Lonesome Dove and some other
Wilson
books. That's right.
Dove, other Texas authors. Jeez. I
Well,
mean,
there's Catherine Ann Porter. She was a big one. O. Henry lived in Austin for a while.
yeah, that's true. There's the annual pun off, I think, still every year.
Yeah, J. Frank Dobie was a Texas historian and journalist. Sandra Cisneros was a native Chicagoan, but she's been residing in Texas for a long,
Hmm.
long time. There's the great Elmer Kelton, who my grandmother insulted in person one time at a Cowboys retirement dinner.
There's a feather in your cap.
When yes, yes, he was going on at length about something, telling a story, and he was approaching, I think, an hour at the speaker's podium, and everybody was laughing and clapping at appropriate moments. And my grandmother, in a moment of silence, called out, "Well, if you people would stop clapping for him, he'd shut up and go away." Um, no, but Elmer Kelton wrote, I believe, the Year of Little Rain, about the Great Texas Drought of 1951.
uh,
And then there's Edna Ferber's Giant, which was made into a big film. Edna Ferber was not a Texan, but Giant was a big movie and a big book. And there's quite a few others there. I mentioned Sandra Cisneros. She wrote a great book called The Woman Hollering Creek. Yeah, Texas has had its share of folks who've written big and bigly written about the state of Texas. One name lost to this list is Philip Atlee. Is that a name that you're familiar with?
no idea.
It's the pen name for James Young Phillips, who was born in Fort Worth on January 8th, 1915. If you look up Philip Atlee, you'll find him to be the author of a fiction series featuring Joe Gall, a contract killer for the CIA. This 23-book series was published between 1951 and 1976. Several of these are available as ebooks, or you might find them for sale on auction websites as well, often as a bundled set, like 10 or 12 or so for $50. What you won't find that often is a copy of his 1940 novel titled The Inheritors, or a copy of its reprint title from 1954 called The Naked Year. Now, this story that I'm doing today takes as its main source Chapter 8 from E.R. Bill's book, Telltale Texas: Investigations into Infamous History. Chapter 8 is titled The Disinherited. Please get this book if you have any interest in Texas history. The author does amazing research into a variety And the depth and the width is very interesting in terms of what he looks at. And this is just one of the many things he looks at in this book. James Young Phillips was born into a wealthy Fort Worth family. His father, Edwin, was a powerful attorney whose clients consisted of even wealthier and more powerful oil families who spent time and money with their memberships at the prestigious Rivercrest Country Club. Edwin also served as a director of the Farmers and Mechanics National Bank and president of the Fort Worth Club, a now 137-year-old athletic and fine dining club for local elites. So if you're a local Texan, think the Petroleum Club. Very similar kind of setup. Edwin and Mary Phillips and their 4 sons lived in a large house off of one of the Rivercrest Country Club golf greens. So we're talking about pretty well-to-do.
Right.
In the fall of 1928, Edwin Phillips died, leaving his family with a large stock portfolio, a completely paid-off mortgage, a country club membership, and a seemingly stable future until October of 1929. The stocks vanished overnight, and in the words of James Phillips' younger brother, David, quote, "We were the poorest rich people in Fort Worth." It was this experience, the fall from what he calls the dollar aristocracy of Fort Worth, that led to Phillips writing his book, the book that would enrage the elite class to which he once belonged. The elite class would effectively erase the inheritors from the blackboard of literary classes everywhere and almost for all time. The book was a brutal assessment of the ruling elite. And I'm going to read to you just from the introduction, just so you can get a sense of his writing style. I'll read a couple paragraphs here. The overlords of Fort Worth inhabited the quietest streets. Their large homes fringed the golf courses and had 3 or 4 car garages back of them. The interiors of these homes were lightened by pictures the owners did not understand or care to understand, and in some cases actually disliked. The wives of the owners were well-tended and usually apprenticed to the intelligentsia. They were women who bought Shakespeare in handsomely bound volumes. They bought him and then had their maids dust him at regular intervals. The pages were usually uncut, but the owners were proud to have captured Shakespeare so that he would not get away. They trotted about, these women, to garden festivities and quick culture clubs, and they played bridge for rapaciously high stakes. Their husbands did nothing but make money. They could not be blamed for that. It was all they had been taught to do, and most of them were expert in the field. They were, for the most part, patient men who had been so strongly indoctrinated with the virus of the dollar aristocracy that they could not enjoy themselves fully even when they were financially able to do so. Therefore, they were principally that sad sight, paunchy American businessmen floundering around, flailing ineptly at a white golf ball. And set down in the heart of the town were the children of the country club bludgeoners, the children who were being ready to catch the torch of business. Not all of them were like us. We were well taught, but we were taught too much, and not of the right things. We drove fast cars and drank too much. The inference was given to us by well-bred curlings of the lip that it was neither good nor desirable to be skilled in a trade. Instead, we were taught to prize the professions, which insisted on the profit motif in every conscious act of life. We were the inheritors in this last decade of the 20th century. We had no great respect for our elders, and we could smell, by some strange clairvoyance of despair, the neat destruction that was being built for us. And
Wow.
pretty fine bit of writing there. And in his book, he goes on to have what is basically called the Romana Clef of the ruling elite of Fort Worth, with himself and a friend in the roles of Jimble and Jarvis as they go about watching the country club elite at their parties. And one of the great resounding lines from the book is, maybe they ought to lock the people up in the bank vaults and let the money do the living. Reviews of the Inheritors. Lots of folks had things to say about the Inheritors, mostly about Attlee's style, and the comparisons were not to be taken lightly. There were references to Ernest Hemingway, James Cain, and most often F. Scott Fitzgerald. The energy of the lost generation abounds in several critical essays. From the Kirkus Review of Books, quote, "This is a book that will appeal to those who started on F. Scott Fitzgerald and followed through with John O'Hara, and who demand the best in that particular genre. It is a full-blooded job, written in a virile, vital prose style, which makes a terrific impact," end quote. From the New Republic, "The scattering story has the vitality and conviction of scandal whispered in the cloakroom about the merrymakers you can glimpse in the ballroom beyond," end quote. From the Pittsburgh Press, quote, "There is a danger of taking a book like this too seriously. There is a greater danger in not taking it seriously enough. If you can wade through the unnecessary sophomoric smuttiness, there's some very fine writing to be found," end quote. Texas critics, however, particularly those in Fort Worth, hated the book. The Fort Worth Star-Telegram wrote, quote, "This novel suffers from an overextension of candor in several incidents that should have been saved for a privately printed book of limited circulation." The Wichita Falls Times didn't care for it, quote, "because of the filth it descends to in places," end quote. Other writers, however, loved it. George Sessions Perry, winner of the National Book Award, put together a book called The Collection of Southwest Writers in 1943, and included portions of the Inheritors to appear alongside the works of O. Henry, Catherine Ann Porter, John Steinbeck, and J. Frank Dobie. As my father would say, that's not too bad for a boy from Fort Worth. The Inheritors also appeared in A.C. Green's 1981 book, not A.C. Green, the old basketball player, A.C. Green's
He's so
1981 book,
talented.
The 50 Best Texas Books, where Green heaped praise upon the great lost novel. Green wrote, "This isn't Cowtown. This is the young social set. Carousing, driving big cars too fast, going from party to country club to any kind of devilment and eventual crack-ups, physical and mental. It's an overindulged generation. The story is well done, and it was told 30 or 40 years before its time. Few Texas books have been able to repeat the harsh dismay, the inspired brutality of the Inheritors." But the dollar aristocracy of Fort Worth did everything they could to sink the book. Threats of lawsuits hit publishers in New York. Copies were bought up as quickly as they appeared on shelves, never to be seen again. And library copies were nowhere to be found. Some librarians, vigilant custodians to the free exchange of ideas, kept copies under lock and key. But by and large, the Inheritors came and went in a heartbeat.
Hmm.
As mentioned earlier, it did manage a re-release in 1957 under a new title, The Naked Year. One assessment of that later vintage would describe the book as a Cowtown Catcher in the Rye. So let's go ahead and add Salinger to the literary standard to which Attlee was held. Philip Attlee himself carried on, joining the armed forces during World War II and serving in Burma. He was a Marine and spent the last 2 years of the war as an assistant editor of The Leatherneck, the official magazine of the Marine Corps. He also published fiction in various magazines, and after the war, lived in Mexico, again in Burma as a pilot, and then on to the Canary Islands. And it's here where he may have worked as an intelligence operative, given that his younger brother David, who I mentioned earlier, was the head of the Western Hemisphere division of the CIA. Attlee wrote in Hollywood for a while, in what could be described as a polisher, fixing up scripts that needed rewrites. He also started his Joe Gall novels, which would become the touchstone of his writing career. He earned an Edgar Award for this series in 1970. He returned to Texas at some point, specifically Corpus Christi, where he died in 1991. And that is the case of the great lost literary Texas classic, The Inheritors, written by Philip Attlee.
Wow.
It's a book that I would dearly love to read.
But you cannot find it, right?
E.R. Bills said that he snapped up a copy off eBay for a considerable sum, which he did not say it was what it was. It's a book that it sounds just fantastic. It sounds like the story of the kids that have the party in The Last Picture Show that Sybil Shepherd has to go to, is just what those kids are up to, their escapades. If I ever find a used copy, either by either title, The Naked Year, or the original title of The Inheritors, you darn right I'm gonna pick it up if I can find
Sure,
it,
right,
because it sounds like something that one, because it's gotten such praise from other critics and other writers, and two, because people tell me I shouldn't read it. That's a real incentive for me to read it.
right. It's the Streisand effect, you know. Don't look over here. Don't look over here.
Exactly.
Don't look over here. Right.
Again, the main source for this was E.R. Bill's 2023 book, Telltale Texas Investigations in Infamous History, from the History Press in Charleston, South Carolina. The
Huh.
excellent stopyourkillingme.com website, which is a great resource for folks interested in detective, mystery, and thriller novels. I checked out Amazon and eBay for Philip Attlee novels, prices, and lot set info, just checking out to see what was out there. And most of the books in the Joe Gall series are available either on ebook or like in lot bundles. And I think I
Uh-huh.
found all of them. I think I tracked them all down. And then there's a great YouTube lecture by Mr. Bills, E.R. Bills, from the TCU Literary Legend Rediscovered, Philip Attlee and the Inheritors in the Fort Worth Public Library. It's a presentation he did for the library, and it is available on YouTube. It's about an hour and 10, 15 minutes long,
Mhm.
and he kind of goes over the story of putting together this excellent chapter in his book
Wow.
on this Lost Texas classic that I
Yeah.
I had never heard of until today, or until
Yeah.
I
Super
started
cool.
reading into this.
Yeah, definitely reminiscent of Gatsby, and then I do so little reading these days, especially of fiction. But the writing style seemed very Steinbeckish to me. I don't know
Yeah,
why. I'd have to look at them sort of more, have a more conscious front of brain side by side. I mean, I'm not sure why that struck me, but yeah, very cool, cool story.
yeah, and it looks like something that you would read and then realize that you had known people like that at one point in your life. These folks who had gallivanted in very high circles, and
Mhm.
kind of the things they got away with. The senators' children, the ultra wealthy
Right.
folks, as they find their way into and out of trouble with
Hmm.
phenomenal ease. And Fort Worth doesn't get any attention really. Everybody always talks about Dallas and Houston, and Fort Worth always uh, kind of just, hey, we're here too.
Yeah,
And my dad,
there are tons of cool stories about Fort Worth. Just after World War II and organized crime, all kinds of craziness going on in Fort Worth in the late 40s through the sort of through the 60s into early 70s. Also, insanity happened there.
yeah, it's a great town. That's actually where my dad was born,
Yeah, I
and
know. Yeah, I know.
it's an interesting place, and I think if I had to go back to Texas, that maybe might where I would want to go back and live is Fort Worth.
Mm,
It's an interesting place.
yeah, yeah, I agree.
So there we go.
All right, thank you.
You bet.
It's time for the Dream Idiot's curse word of the week.
All right, ready for a curse word?
I'm always ready for a curse word, Ray.
Curse word this week comes to us from the UK. It is scandal broth. Scandal broth. Any idea? Want to take a guess?
A melange of different items or people that come together to form a soup of awfulness. I don't know.
No, scandal broth is actually just tea. The UK, yeah, fairly famous for the drinking of tea, but in my mind, again in that same vintage, early part of the 20th century, men were off working or they were off at war, women were at home, and then the term scandal broth came up as when your neighbor or friend came over to gossip about what was going on in the neighborhood and talk about the fact that Phyllis has a new man in her life. He's a foreigner. He's from Wales. Um, you would talk over tea, and so tea was referred to as scandal broth. I don't know. I just thought it was sort of
I like
funny.
that.
Yeah.
I like that. It's much in the same way that book clubs are actually just wine clubs. Uh,
Yes. Yeah. Pretty much so. Right. Yeah. Quite similar.
All right, well, let's brew up some scandal broth. I like that.
So that seemed appropriate because considering the story I'm working on or telling this week. So during the course of this podcast, now we're going on 2.5 years of doing this. We've told lots of stories about racism and sexism and fun things like that, given a few examples of how people have overcome blindingly stupid and hateful behavior. And it's always people that look like you and me who are the oppressors. So that's fun for us. The story of Bessie Coleman I told a million years ago, well, was the black woman from Texas who became a pilot and a barnstormer. And so, I love those types of stories where people who are oppressed overcome that oppression and do so seemingly without even noticing that bullies or oppressors are trying to keep them down. They kind of just plow through, and the white noise that is in their way, not only does it not bother them, they sort of fail to recognize it. I have a lot of sort of admiration for that type of personality. This certainly has happened quite a bit in athletics. So I'm sure you've heard the story of you may not know her name, but there's a woman named Catherine Switzer. She was the woman who in 1967 snuck in to the Boston Marathon. She hid in some bushes near the start. She was wearing sweats and a hoodie. I think she may have registered with like just her first initial. And the race starts. She takes off on the race, and she's most of the way through the marathon when this fat bastard who is the race director. There's a black and white photo of her, I think, from Time magazine, and it's basically him, chasing her down in an attempt to physically drag her out of the event. The race director's name is Jock Semple, Semple. Imagine having your name go down in infamy for having done such a stupid thing. The year before, a woman named Bobby Gibb had tried to enter the race, but had been rejected by race director Will Cloney. And he rejected her because, in his mind, women were physiologically incapable of running 26 miles. Of course, women were very slowly added to the Olympics. I think every 4 years there was steady improvement and more events were added. A 17-year-old Yankee minor league pitcher, a woman named Jackie Mitchell, once struck out Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig in an exhibition game back to back on just 7 pitches.
Holy shit.
Right. The two of them swung and missed, I think, 5 times of those 7 pitches. The next day, she was banned from baseball by Commissioner Kennesaw Mountain Landis because, in his view, baseball was simply too strenuous for women. And of course, I mean, there have been women's baseball leagues. Many, many women played baseball for years, some for decades. It's complete sexist horseshit. Right around the same time as the story I'm about to tell, the bicycle was invented. Depending on whose version of the whose history of the bike you read, but early part of the 19th century, the bicycle is becoming popularized. This newfangled device allows people to travel some distance from home with moderate ease and convenience. And then a whole bunch of men panic because they realize that their daughters and their wives could ride their bike into town and, oh my God, post their own mail and maybe go see a boy and do other things that they're not supposed to do. And also during, almost immediately when the bike starts to grow in popularity, you had people claiming that there was the threat of bicycle face. So that grimace that you make when you're straining as you ride a bike up a hill, girls, young women were told that their face would stick that way, and obviously, no man would marry them then. And it would also surely be the case, according to at least one news source, that the constant contact with a bicycle seat would cause damage, quote, to the organs of matrimonial necessity, unquote. It's unclear why newspapers thought only women's organs were affected and not men's. So you can't ride a bike because you'll have to have sex later. So anyway, so this is again, there are countless examples. Any one of those examples I gave could be a story in its own, could be an episode in its own. But that brings us to something called the Barkley Challenge.
Oh
Very
no! Oh no! Oh no!
not
No!
not and not Charles Barkley.
Yeah, no, I know. It's just
You know the
the
story?
Barkley Challenge. Now I know what it is, but I've not heard this story. But I know
Okay.
what it is. Yeah.
So early days of the 19th century, 1809. So this is pre-internet, just to clarify for listeners.
Yeah.
Pedestrianism is a thing. People would watch walking events. People would attempt to walk from that city to that city in a certain period of time, and then others would try to break that record. Then they would do it on stilts. Then they would do it while juggling or while telling jokes. It was a much simpler time than it is now. 1809, a man named Captain Robert Barclay Allardyce made a bet with a rival, a man named Sir James Webster Wedderburn, that he could walk 1,000 miles in 1,000 hours. Uh, but the problem here is you have to, sort of quickly crunch some numbers and figure out how do you break that down in a way that makes sense. And so Barclay's approach was, okay, I'm gonna walk 2 miles in 30 minutes, and I'm gonna rest 90 minutes, and I'm gonna repeat over and over and over and over and over again for 42 days. Uh, so 2 miles in 30 minutes, 4 miles an hour is a moderate walk, is a reasonable walking clip. So he'd walk 2 miles and then eat, sleep, go to the bathroom, do whatever you need to do in the 90 minutes, and then do it again. And it worked. He completed his walk on the 12th of July, 1809, 42 days after it commenced. And it became widely known as the Barkley match, the Barkley Challenge, and people actually watched him do it. Um, at first glance, this may seem kind of easy, kind of leisurely, but the toll that this would take on your body, and then the lack of prolonged sleep, would have to make you go slowly insane. It seems like in my mind, it makes much more sense to walk 20 miles, sleep 8 hours, and then repeat. That seems way more logical to me. But anyway, in the days, weeks, months, years, even after Barkley did his first successful attempt, many other pedestrians all over the world tried as well, and they kept failing, kept failing, and kept failing. There's a woman in Australia who attempted the Barkley match, and she failed as well. But in 1864, a woman named Emma Sharp heard about the Australian woman and her failed attempt at the Barkley match, and she decided that she was going to give it a go. She's in her early 30s. She's married to her husband, John, and he is, I guess while he's married and is sort of encouraging, he's not really all that enthusiastic because walking 1,000 miles is not really very ladylike in his mind. But by all accounts, it seems like she doesn't really give a shit what he thinks either. And so she decides to go ahead. She happens to know a man who is a landlord of what in one account is called the Quarry Gap Hotel, and in another account is called the Quarry Gap Pub. This is in Lasterdyke, England, and this guy offers up the grounds, offers up the facility to be the course. And he's still this. He's going to get a percentage of the money that's earned from ticket sales, and he can sell food. Some folks might actually stay because these things were tourist, sporting events, tourist traps. People would come from distances. This was like, just picture really slow NASCAR racing, and people would come and hang out and kind of cheer her on. Um, so the fact that for Sharp's walk, it was really kind of a bigger draw than for when a man would do it, because it was so unique to see a woman even make this attempt, and it was even more insane and scandalous. And I'm sure gave many folks the vapors, because she Emma chose to dress like a man. She basically wore what looks like a tweed suit. She wore trousers, a shirt, and a jacket or like an overcoat, but she didn't she didn't wear the typical sort of Victorian era dress for women at the time. I mean, this is at a time where if women went to the beach to swim, they had to wear something that was like a cross between a hoop skirt and a burlap sack, right? Uh, and so the fact that she was in a much more practical attire to do this thing was also just, outrageous. So September 17th, 1864, she starts off. She takes the exact same approach that Barkley had. She has roped off a course that is 120 yards long, that is just in a loop. The convenient part of 120 yards, 360 feet, is she can do a lap. I mean, basically, one lap is, she can do that. Wait, I'm off on the. If she walks for it's 30 loops is 2 miles. That's right. I got the math confused in my head there for a second. So if she does 30 loops in 30 minutes, that's exactly 2 miles, just as he did. It's easy to keep track of. She would take a 90-minute break, usually in the pub, grab a grab a nap, grab something to eat, take a break, do whatever she needs to do, and she kept at this routine for essentially nearly 6 weeks straight, walking day and night. So, you know, as you would expect, this starts to become a news item. It starts, getting worldwide news coverage about this woman doing this thing that heretofore only men or mostly men had attempted, and so tens of thousands of people show up at various points in time to watch her, at least in passing, watch for a few minutes. Like, oh wow, this really is true. She really is doing this. As is the case with all sporting events, wagers start to take place. What are the odds of her finishing? And then the odds would change the longer, the closer she got to being done with it. And so, people are making money anyway, any way they can, just as they are now in sports. And again, just because this is the way humans have always been, there are, people start to basically fuck with her. So, there's jeering, there's yelling and screaming and insults. Fans from Philly, I'm sure, came in to throw batteries at her. Uh, she was about a week out from being done. So she's 32, 33 days from being done. She faced a few attacks from folks with chloroform. She just
My
on
God.
kept on trotting along. People would throw embers on the path. There were multiple attempts to drug her food, so she'd be sickened and unable to continue. People would just stick their foot out and try to trip her while she walked by, because it's this loop. It's 120 yards long, but it's not very wide. So she's in very close proximity to folks, and so they were then touching distance, right?
And that person was Woody Hayes, Ohio State football coach.
So things are getting worse and worse and worse. Finally, last few days, 18 police officers disguised as citizens are just in the crowd, just monitoring people, just watching folks. What are they doing? What are folks up to? And getting closer to the end, one citizen just volunteered, just showed up every evening as the sun's going down and walked in front of her with a loaded rifle. And then for the final two
Wait, wait, wait,
days,
wait, wait, wait. As protection or as
as protection. Right.
okay,
Just
all
yeah,
right.
walk 20 feet in front of her holding a gun. It's like, yeah, go ahead and try it. I will blow your head off. And then for the final 2 days, Emma, I don't know who brought this for her or how she got it. Emma actually carried a pistol with her for the last 48 hours, which she had to fire a total of 27 times, just
Oh my God.
over people's heads. But people just kept trying to fuck with her while she's walking. I will drop you where you stand. Leave me alone. She keeps going, keeps going. October 29th, 1864, at 5:15 a.m., Emma Sharp becomes the first woman to complete the Barkley Challenge, despite the fact that obviously women are, frail and incompetent and couldn't possibly do anything quite so strenuous. She, physically was actually okay afterwards. During the first few weeks, she had some swollen ankles that were bugging her, but like halfway through, that problem subsided, and so she was actually, mostly fine. It's estimated that over 100,000 people came out to watch her at some point or another while she's walking laps. And there were, even at 5:15 in the morning, there were 25,000 people there to watch her at the finish line. Um, and again, first thing in the morning, there's a band there to celebrate her success. The next day, they, of all things, roasted an ox in her honor. Her husband John was apparently, at least initially, embarrassed by all the hubbub, and he hid in the pub because he didn't really
Oh,
want
John,
to.
shame on you, John.
He didn't really want to have anything to do with it, but he felt better about it because all of the publicity, et cetera. She made about 5,000, or sorry, 500 pounds, which in 1864 is a ton of money. He quit his job working in the ironworks, and so he was fine with the cash, but even though he was embarrassed. And she didn't, never did any more competitive walking. She lived a long time. She died in 1920 at the age of 92. And the walking stick that she used in 1864 is still around. It's in the possession of her great granddaughter in London. So Emma Sharp, the
Wow.
the pedestrian.
That is
So
very cool.
So that's the equivalent of me saying, "Okay, Morris, it's I'm going to see you on in 42 days. I'm going to start walking because you're actually I think you're just under 1,000 miles from me right now."
Yeah, right at about 1,000 here.
Yeah, no,
Got
thank
a
you.
got a slight change in altitude.
Yeah, but I mean,
Holy cow.
doing it on a loop though would drive. I mean, as a kid when he had to like run laps around a football field, even that made me crazy. Uh, and doing this would just, would drive me through the ceiling. It made me nuts, but um, quite an athlete.
I actually I thought I recognized this, but I didn't because I thought you were talking about something else. So this is brand new to me. I had not heard about
Okay,
this. Yeah, that's very cool.
is there a second Barkley challenge I don't know about?
I'm thinking about the one that's run in Tennessee. It might not be called the Barclay
Okay,
Challenge. It's the one that's run by the old prisons and stuff, and it's crazy. There's a
okay,
documentary on it. I can't. It starts with a B, I think. I'll
okay.
have to look it up. But that is just a crazy time too. I mean, could you imagine if they had to do play by play of that? Just two guys sitting up in a booth. Just she's
Left,
walking,
right, yeah.
she's
She's walking,
walking.
and there she is, walking in the pub, taking a break. We'll be back in 90 minutes.
This brought to you by Nathan's Kosher Hot Dogs. One bite tells you it's a Nathan's. Wow, what a story, and good for her. I mean, that's just when you started off with it was the Boston Marathon, right? Where that big old slobbo is just trying to tackle her and being a total
Mm,
dick. Unbelievable.
yep, there you have it.
All right, two stories about oppression,
Completely unconnected. So
completely unconnected.
thanks for listening, folks. We appreciate it. Please give us 5 stars. Give us some reviews. We haven't had any reviews in quite a while, so shoot us a review. That'd be hugely helpful. Check us out on Dream Idiots. Have a bunch of cool merchandise on there now, including some new Rough Tiger stuff and T-shirts related to the Central Texas Podcast Collaborative. And so, if you're a podcaster in Texas and want to be part of that, we have some stuff on our website, and then there's a Facebook group for that group as well. If you want to come meet us in public, that'd be fabulous. And thanks for all the stuff you're doing for us. We appreciate it.
Yes, indeed. And those are new Rough Tiger the 3/4 sleeve ones they've got. Those are
The baseball jersey or kind
yeah,
of
the
yeah,
baseball
yeah,
jersey looks.
yeah.
Those are pretty
They're not
sweet
bad.
looking.
Yeah.
All righty, folks. Thanks, and be good to each other.
This is a Rough Tiger production.
Bong bong,
Hmm.
Bryan.
Bong bong,
Bong bong.
bong bong. Good.